Let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so very thankful for this morning, for this new week, another opportunity to study together, to grow and learn. And we ask for your care and protection, that you can help us to face the challenges before us, and that we can learn the lessons that you would have us learn from all the various trials that we face. We pray for others. We know, Lord, that you are bringing this movement to an upper room experience. And we just pray, Lord, that we can examine our hearts and that the convicting power of your Spirit to convict of sin, righteousness, and judgment will be actuated in our lives. Forgive us for our sins and help us to trust in your righteousness and goodness. Be with us now in this study. Guide and direct us in all the things that we are looking into. May they encourage and help us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here this morning. And we're continuing our study on Joshua. And I want to finish off some loose ends. So we've been trying to understand this line, how to lay out the line. Now, so a couple of little things that we had addressed. We spent quite a bit of time on the 3 days, which I think we have at least proposed a solution to the puzzle that I think is satisfactory. And then we addressed the period of time that there was no Passover, which to me was kind of a surprise. I never really had thought about it before. And we sort of had a bit of a discussion about what it meant. We know it's related to the covenants, and we have the circumcision attached to it. And when we're dealing with because what we want to look at is this period of today, I want to look at this period of 14 years, whether it's a real period or just how we would understand this. Now, this is something that comes from rabbinic Jews, and the Seder Olam Rabbah, which isn't a very reliable document, but that's sort of the document that explicitly lays this out and is probably the main basis for rabbinic Jews believing this period of 14 years. And it's connected to the idea of the Jubilee cycle. And there's still a debate within Judaism regarding how or when the Jubilee cycle exists. How did it exist in the past? How do we count it? Lots of times you will run into people who believe they have found the Jubilee cycle and they're going to find how it applies in our time. Since I started studying the Jubilee cycle back in 1985, might have even been a little bit earlier, but I think it was about 85, because there was a group in our upper room Bible studies who believed in the 1987 Jubilee. So they believed Jesus was coming back in 1987. Unfortunately, it was in a tabloid type newspaper that I had, and which was destroyed by someone. But and I can never find it on the internet. But I had read that through quite extensively. And then after that Jubilee failed, a friend of mine who's now a pastor, he was involved in the 1984 Jubilee. So they just added another year or another 7 years to that cycle. And they believed that Jesus was coming back in 1984. So that was as a new Adventist, baptized in December 25th, 82. These are pretty new ideas, these time-setting ideas, and especially this idea of the Jubilee. So I was very familiar with the different theories of the Jubilee cycle. And you can see then how the sabbatical cycle and the Jubilee cycle would be connected to this idea that there's these two periods of 7 years. And from Stephen's chronology, we would say that this first period of 7 years would be more what we would call 6 years. It would be an inclusive count. Is that correct, Stephen? Is that how you would look at how we count these ages of Caleb and Joshua?
Yeah, I'm just going by what the Bible gives us.
Yeah, I know. When I say it's yours, it's just, I didn't say you created it necessarily. Now, so the verses dealing with that, with the age of Caleb, that was in Deuteronomy, right? If I remember correctly. Or was it in Numbers?
The age of Caleb, we get that from Joshua chapter 14.
Oh, that's Joshua 14. Okay. So we're going to go there. Just hang on. Yeah, because we looked at that yesterday. Right. Caleb's request and inheritance. So when then the children of Judah came unto Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said unto him, Thou knowest the thing that the Lord said unto Moses the man of God concerning me and thee in Kadesh Barnea. 40 years old was I when Moses the servant of the Lord sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and brought him word again as it was in mine heart. Nevertheless, my brethren that went up with me made the heart of the people melt, but I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses sware on that day, saying, Surely the land whereon thy feet have trodden shall be thine inheritance, and thy children's forever, because thou hast wholly followed the Lord my God. And now behold, the Lord hath kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, since the Lord spake this word unto Moses while the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, lo, I'm in this day 85 years old. So how is it that we lay this chronology out? Stephen, if you can explain it again. What's the underlying assumptions, and how do you put this together?
Okay, so he's saying it's 45 years since he spied out the land.
Okay.
So that was the year after the Exodus.
Okay, so now when we say it's a year after, we're going to say it's a year and how long after?
Yes, okay, a year and maybe several months.
Yeah, so several months up to
Maybe
less
about
than
50.
6. Less than 6.
Yes.
Okay. So less than 6, more than 3.
Yes.
Somewhere between there. Okay. So, the one thing that we don't have when it comes to these spans of time is we don't have, when somebody says, they were 40 years old, we're not sure how the rounding up or rounding down occurs, because a person isn't exactly that day. When they say I was 40 years old, they're not talking about their birthday, right? So exactly where in the year something occurs, it sometimes leaves this little wiggle room or leeway or whatever you want to call it that isn't always clear. So, but he's going to say that he was 40 years old, and then there's 45 years. So he's now going to be 85 years old at this point. Now, we don't have a specific date when this is occurring. So this is just sometime later. So how many years after they crossed the Jordan is this then, based on what we have here?
6.
Yeah, so it's 6, right? And so we're taking that year. So that means when the Exodus occurred, based on this, we would say that Caleb would have been 39.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, could he possibly have been 38? Or, not quite yet 39. You understand what I'm saying? Like how precise are we as far as somebody's age?
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, so it is possible that this is actually about 7 years or closer to 7 years than 6 years. Would you agree with that?
That's possible.
Yeah, so it's possible. So we don't know specifically. Now, of course, you could even sort of move it the other way a little bit because we're not given at what time of the year this is, that I can tell. It's just, so it's happening sometime in what Caleb refers to as his 85th year. That's normally how we would look at it, or that, because when we count how old we are, when we turn 1 year old, we've been alive. It's more than 1 year. It's 1 year since our birth. But we can also talk about a baby the first year of life, and then the second year. But now, when you're like, I'm 59, so people will say, well, I'm 59 years old. Am I in my 60th year? Right? Technically, I would be. But often we misuse that expression, and people will say I'm in my 60th year when they actually mean they're in their 60. They should say they're in their 61st year. So we have this sort of imprecise way of measuring our years, our years of life, and so it's kind of hard to say what people in the Bible, when they say they're 85 years old, exactly how they're counting that, whether they're rounding up, rounding down, waiting until they've actually completed 85 years. Any thoughts on this? I mean, I know this is an area that there isn't a lot of thought put into it. We just sort of accept, we just do the simple math because that's all the Bible gives us. Can we see why the rabbis are going to want to mark this as a period of 7 years? Or is this what they mark as a period of 7 years? Dwight, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I said, I believe that they're trying to mark it as such.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the way that I look at it, is they're saying this is 7 years, however they look at that. Because again, the rabbinic Jews in this, they give us that it's 7 years. They don't give us the reasoning behind how they do that. They just take it as 7 years. And now let's go back to this diagram. So here, that means they're going to look at this period of time here as they've now, so lots of times when they say it, they'll say they have the conquering of the land and then having rest from their enemies is the end of the 14 years. So there's 2 periods. And we can see that there's this conquering of the land. I wouldn't have said had rest from their enemies. I would have said more receiving their inheritance. There's going to be this period of time after this that's not really well defined in the scriptures that I can tell, that they're then going to be distributing this land. So this, this is something that I've used, and just to show you why I've used it. um, when we go over to these periods of 7 times 252, so this is that 504 years from 34 AD to 538, and the 1260 years together are 7 times 252 years. And then we can go back from 34 AD, and 3 times 252 brings us to 723, so the captivity of Hoshea. And then a further 3 times 252 brings us back to the conquest of the Promised Land. That's 1749 BC. That's going to be 14 years after they crossed the Jordan, and 54 years from the Exodus. So you can see this here is just kind of, and this period of 54 years, then I expand out like this. I take the 40 years, the crossing of the Jordan, and these 2 periods of 7 years. So you can see they crossed the Jordan in 1493 on the 10th day of the first month. And then there's 2 periods of 7 years being marked here. And that's basically just from the rabbinic Jews. So we have no specific way that I know that we can mark the second period. But we're going to take a look at that. Now, their basis then is that they're going to see this as connected to the sabbatical cycle, and that then is going to be connected to the Jubilee cycle. Now, so in their understanding, do you know where they would begin the Jubilee then? Because I see people talk about the Jubilee, and where would most people think that the Jubilee begins? The Jubilee cycle, the sabbatical cycle.
In the 7th month, isn't it?
Well, no, but what year? What event would mark the start of the Jubilee cycle? To many people that I've found on the internet, when they talk about the Jubilee, they're going to go back to what event?
I'm guessing the entering of Canaan.
Okay, so the entering of Canaan. So that
On that one, I wouldn't disagree with Stephen at all.
yeah. So
Yet,
yeah.
yet, if we are to make an application of Scripture, as is presented, for I am the Lord, I change not.
Yeah.
To me, I would then be looking that this Jubilee cycle was also instituted in Eden, but I cannot provide a scripture reference for that.
Yeah. Now, see, I don't believe that it goes back to Eden. So now I'm not saying that we can't apply a sabbatical and Jubilee cycle to Eden based upon the 7 days of creation. But when it talks about the sabbatical and Jubilee cycle that's instituted by God, if we look at Leviticus 25, it's going to talk about this. Now, when I ask the question, how do people usually do it? Lots of people just look for the year of the Exodus, and they just count from the Exodus for some reason. And I have no idea why they do that, because it's pretty clear that it's when they come into the land, right? So it's here in Leviticus 25. And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years shalt thou sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. So they're going to come into the land, and they're then going to sow their field and prune the vineyard. And then in the 7th year shall be the Sabbath of rest unto the land. So the sabbatical cycle would begin once they actually start planting things in the promised land. And the first 7 years are going to be involved, in my understanding of it, of these various conquerings of the land. It's going to take them 7 years to do that. and that in Joshua 14 is marking at the point where they're now going to receive their inheritance, and it would be then that they're going to begin this sabbatical cycle.
Well, you had the 2.5 tribes, the other side of the Jordan. They were already in that land, so they would have been planting and so forth. That area.
Right. So some people are going to start planting, but when they're going to start this sabbatical cycle would be when everyone's in the land. That is, the way that I read it is, I mean, because you couldn't have different people starting different sabbatical cycles. I mean, you could say, well, the first time somebody plants something, that's going to be the start of the sabbatical cycle for everyone. Or you could say when everybody has now settled in and they're planting, they're going to start this sabbatical cycle, right? Because it has to be something that's unified as part of a group. And the ones on the other side of the Jordan, they're going to be involved in all these battles for this period of 7 years.
Yeah, except for the younger ones and the women.
Right. Yeah. Right. So you're going to have, the children and the women, they're going to stay behind for the most part. So you're going to have them there. There would probably be some men there. But the point is, you have to start it somewhere. The sabbatical cycle is going to start somewhere. And it could be, that there's 6 years that they take to conquer the land. And that it's going to start with a 7th year, that they're kind of in the 7th year here. And we still have never really decided, at least I haven't, how the Jubilee sabbatical cycle works. We know that there's 7 years, and then there's the land rests for a year. And then when you get to the 49th year, the land's going to rest for 2 years. But exactly how that is lined up, how the sabbatical and the Jubilee years line up, there's quite a few different theories. I mean, there are people who just think that there's another 50th year, and then you start the sabbatical cycle over again. So they have a Jubilee cycle is a complete 50 years. And I've seen lots of people do that rather than 49 years. And, I've played around with it. I've had some different theories on how it works. But there's nothing where I can just say, I understand completely how the Jubilee sabbatical cycle works, especially how the Jubilee lines up with the sabbatical cycle. So there are some things, there's some clues we're going to look at here. We're going to look at some of these problems. Now, so we know it's going to be when it says, 6 years shalt thou sow thy field, and 6 years shalt thou prune thine vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard. So this is going to begin in the fall. And why would you begin in the fall for the Sabbath rest of the land? Why do they not begin in the spring?
Because you've just had the harvest.
Okay, so you're going to have your harvest. You're going to have your religious festivals, right? And so you have this religious year that's going to end with the Feast of Tabernacles. So you're going to proclaim that it's a sabbatical year, and then you're not going to plant anything that winter, right? That fall. You're not going to grow a crop.
Can we equate this with the preparation day?
Well, when it comes to like the manna, for instance, where they have the double portion, like Like, you understand what I'm saying? There's this double portion of the manna.
No, I understand that portion. I understand what
So
you're
can we
saying.
take that as sort of a preparation? That's on the preparation day. They have the double portion of the manna.
Well, what I'm saying is when you're dealing with this on the preparation day before the Sabbath, you would have completed all of your work. But you come to this in the 7th month. So you're now in the evening of that preparation day, just before the Sabbath.
Okay.
So in a similar way, the land is being treated as we would treat this, that all of the work is now done and it is time to rest.
Okay. So you're connecting that just to being the 7th month.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, now it's going to happen on the 10th day of the 7th month that you blow the trumpet of the Jubilee. But when it comes to the sabbatical year, it's just that it begins on the first day of the 7th month. Is that how we understand it? When is the trumpet? When it is there? When it comes to the sabbatical rest of the land, there is the Feast of Trumpets that happens every year. But on a Jubilee year, they're going to have the trumpet of the Jubilee that's going to sound. So let's read this here about the Jubilee. We'll come back to that. Okay, and thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years. And the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the day of atonement shall ye make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. And a jubilee shall the 50th year be unto you. Ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth of itself, nor gather the grapes of it in thine vine undressed. For it is the Jubilee. It shall be holy unto you. Ye shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. In the year of Jubilee ye shall return every man unto his possession, and if thou sell aught unto thy neighbor, or buyest aught of thy neighbor's hand, ye shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years of the Jubilee thou shalt buy of thy neighbor, and according unto the number of years of the fruits he shall sell unto thee. So this is talking about the land. So if you have land, that land's going to return to you. And so the value of that land changes based on its relationship chronologically to the Jubilee year. Is that what this is saying here? Because if you sell your land, just after a Jubilee year, well, that land's going to be owned by that person until the next Jubilee. So it could be 48 years. But if you're selling your land prior to a Jubilee, that person, in a sense, that person owning that land is owning it temporarily. It has to return back to the original family. Is that what we understand here regarding the Jubilee?
That would be my understanding.
Yeah. So, so it says, according to the multitude of years, thou shalt increase the price thereof, and according to the fewness of the years, thou shalt diminish the price of it. For according to the number of the years of the fruits doth he sell unto thee. So it's what that land can produce in that period of time that gives that value to the land. So we're going to see Leviticus 25 goes into Leviticus 26. That's where we have the 7 times is based upon this. Now it says here, verse 17, ye shall not therefore oppress one another. And it's already mentioned this before, but thou shalt fear the Lord thy God, for I am the Lord your God. So this is just talking about the fact that this is given so that you cannot have somebody end up with all the land and oppressing their brethren. That is, it provides this equity because they all have this possession, the land, and that land is what provides that economic stability to each of these families and to the tribes. Now, of course, once they get a king, this ceases. This king starts to take over the land, and they no longer have this practice in place. So the king does then oppress them because of the neglect of the sabbatical and Jubilee cycle, more specifically, that this happens. It says, wherefore ye shall do my statutes and keep my judgments and do them, and ye shall dwell in the land in safety. And the land shall yield her fruit, and ye shall eat your fill and dwell therein in safety. And if ye shall say, what shall we eat the 7th year? Behold, we shall not sow nor gather in our increase. Then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years. And ye shall sow the 8th year, and eat yet of old fruit until the 9th year. Until her fruits come in, ye shall eat of the old store. So this is talking about the Jubilee cycle, correct? And the sabbatical cycle, I guess, as well, their connection. So what's going to happen in a Jubilee year? So you're going to have the 6th year, and then you're going to have the 7th year and the 8th year. So does that food have to last for 3 years, according to this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is quite remarkable. That is, there's a trust in God that has to occur. To not plant would definitely go against human nature, because we would think, well, we need to. Now, God's going to bless them in the 6th year, and they're going to have enough food for 3 years in this. So that 6th year is going to be, I guess, the 48th year of the Jubilee cycle. And then they have enough food for the 49th year and the 50th year. And they'll still be eating of the old fruit until the 9th year. And then, of course, you have to have enough grain left over so that you can plant, right? Which is always, an act of faith. I mean, if you're very, very hungry and you have all the grain you have is the grain you need to plant, it's pretty hard not to eat that. So there's really a blessing in how things were done in the past as far as dependence upon God. Okay.
We got the 3 in there too. Of the 3 significant.
Yeah, the 3 years, right? So the Jubilee
Ties into things. 3 years ties into things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also the 8th year, talking about the 8th year and the 9th year. So that's what we understand what the Bible says about the Jubilee and sabbatical cycle. And what was the other point? Okay, so we know, it was about the trumpet of the Jubilee. So thou shalt cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. So when we look at Ezekiel chapter 40, there's some interesting points here. One point I never really thought about before, but it says in the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year. So we looked at this before in Ezekiel quite a few different times, but we know that Ezekiel is going to begin prophesying in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity, which is his own personal captivity as well. And this is going to be in the 25th year of the captivity. So if the 5th year of the captivity is in 592 BC, right? So this is going to be in the 30th year, the 4th month, the 5th day of the month. I was among the captives by the river of Kibar, that the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God in the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. So that's Ezekiel 1, verse 1 and 2, that he's going to have his first vision. If we go to Ezekiel 40 and it talks about the 5 and 20th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, which here is Rosh Hashanah, in the 10th day of the month, that's the 10th day of the 7th month. How many years later is that from the 5th year of the captivity? So this is the 20 and 5, or the 5 and 20th year of the captivity. So how many years later is this? How many years from the 5th year of the captivity to the 25th year of the captivity?
Years.
You said 20?
Yeah.
15.
So just reading it on
Oh,
a
sorry.
surface, that's what we would say. Stephen?
You said 15, I think.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, 20.
Okay, so we would say it's 20, but how many years has it been since the 5th day of the 4th month to this vision? So this is going to be the 10th day of the 7th month. So how many years, or how long has it been? So if we tried to nail that down specifically, how long would we think that this is? So we say it's 20 years. Is it 20 years?
You've got 19 years and 4 months, or
Well,
5,
2
5
months.
months. Huh?
Well, it's the 5th day of the 4th month. So and to the 10th day of the 7th month is 3 months and 5 days.
Right, okay.
So this is going to be 19 years, 3 months and 5 days. That is, when he says it's the 5 and 20th year of the captivity, he's counting fall to fall, right? So the 5th year of the captivity began in the fall of 593 BC, right, in the 7th month. And so in Ezekiel chapter 1, when he talks about in the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity, he's counting in the 5th year. He's actually near the end of that 5th year. He's got another 3 months, and then he's going to be in the 6th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. Correct? So just on the surface, we read this, it looks like 20 years, but it's actually 19 years. 19 years, 3 months, 5 days. Can people see that? Or do I need to use some illustrations?
The illustrations would be helpful.
Okay. So, somewhere here in all these documents, all these files I have, Ezekiel.
If you could show it on a line, show it on a line. a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to show it here. Just, I got to find. I could draw it on the whiteboard, but it's easier. I have some really nice drawings here somewhere. I have a lot of Ezekiel stuff. Okay, so this one, this is these charts I have. So when it talks about the 30th year in Ezekiel 1:1, he's actually saying the 30th year of the count of the Jubilee. And so I placed Josiah's Passover in 622, which is where most people place it. And that's going to be the 49th year of a Jubilee cycle that Passover occurs. And that fall is going to be the 50th year. So that means that the count would then begin. The first year is, 391.5, 19 years, 3 months, and 5 days. Okay, we got those numbers, all those numbers from 391.5. That's just Iran's comment in the chat if you want to look at it. And then we go here. You're going to see that this is not the one I want. It's going to be captivity fall to fall. There's just too much information here to look at as a useful chart. Here, I'm going to just skip through this, find one that's a little more useful. Okay, and this is one I want to look at. Dealing with the sabbatical and Jubilee years. I got to remember that's number 189. Okay. Okay, so we got all these things. I know it's much, much later here. I should just memorize where all these charts are. Okay, here's what I want. So Ezekiel, I have all these nice charts, and this one's probably the best one. Nope, that's not the best one. Be this one. Okay, I know this is pretty big. August 19th, June. I shouldn't keep all these. Some of these are just working copies, so I know it's. Spring to spring, fall to fall. That's not the ones I want. Why is the other chart not there? Oh, this is the one. So the one at the bottom here is the correct one. Try to zoom in as much as I can. Whoops. Okay, so it says Babylonian calendar. This is the correct one. Now, what you see here is you're going to have, I have the siege of Jerusalem. The end of the siege is July 18th, 586. And if you count from the siege of Jerusalem that's mentioned here in Ezekiel, and you count the temple's going to be destroyed here in 586, so just it's going to be destroyed a month later. It's going to be 13 years to October 22, 573 BC, which is Ezekiel 40, verse 1. And so we can also see, if we go back to, it's the first vision here, 592. So here's his first vision. That's going to be the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. So it says the 5th day of the 4th month in the 5th year. And this is going to be the 10th day of the 7th month in the 25th year of the captivity. And the 14th year since the city was smitten. So if he's counting the year that the city was smitten as the 14th year, he's counting this as an ordinal count, correct? Because if it's 13 years, then it's the 14th year. So since the city was smitten, if you're going to go back to the end of the siege, which is July 18th, 586, in the 9th day of the 4th month, that the wall of Jerusalem was broken down. Here, I'll make this bigger so you can see this part of it. You can see the end of the siege occurs here. And in Ezekiel 40, verse 1, he's going to say it's the 25th year of the captivity and the 14th year since the city was smitten. Now, if he had this vision one day earlier, would it have been the 25th year of the captivity?
From what you're saying, it doesn't.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Because the year, in a Jubilee year, the first day of the year is going to be the 10th day of the 7th month. In a regular year, the first day of the 7th month is the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah. But on a Jubilee year, the 10th day of the 7th month is Rosh Hashanah, which is why the rabbinic Jews recognize Ezekiel 40, verse 1 is referring to a Jubilee year. And if it's a Jubilee year, it's then going to be the beginning of what they would call the 50th year, right?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. So it's going to be the beginning of the 50th year, which is going to be the first year of the next sabbatical cycle. And that's why if we go to Ezekiel 1, where he talks about it being the 30th year, that's going to be here in 592. He's going to say it's the 5th year of Jehoiachin's captivity and the 30th year. But he doesn't say it's the 30th year of the Jubilee cycle. But it is, right? That's what he's talking about when he says it's the 30th year. And that would fit perfectly with the idea that the 50th year is going to begin on the 10th day of the 7th month in 573. The day before would still be the 49th year, right? And it would also be the 24th year of Jehoiachin's captivity. So the 25th year begins when the Day of Atonement happens in October 22nd, 573 BC. And we also know, because when we look at his first vision, and the date that it's October 22nd is quite significant, because his first vision is going to happen on July 21st, 592 BC. So that means in the year that he has his first vision, April 19th is the first day of the first month. Because in 1844, July 21st is the 5th day of the 4th month, just as it is in 592 BC. And that's also true 19 years later, it's a Metonic cycle. In 573 BC, the first day of the first month is going to be April 19th. Because October 22nd is the 10th day of the 7th month. So this count here, 13 years, is counting from a year that's going to begin in the fall. Right? So this count here. Now it says it's the 14th year, and this is the first year. When it happens, that's going to be the first year. But now we get here, it's now in the 14th year. Even though it's 13 years and, well, you're looking at July, August, September, October, 3 months. So it's 13 years and 3 months. But they're still going to call it the 14th year. And that's because it's an ordinal count. Now, the Jubilee cycle is not really an ordinal count in the way that we think of it. I mean, it sort of is in a way, I guess, an ordinal count as well. But it's starting always fall to fall. And Jehoiachin's captivity is based upon Jehoiachin's reign. So his captivity is actually going to have an accession year. That is, Ezekiel's going to count Jehoiachin's captivity not in the same way he counts the 14 years from the destruction of the city. Now, I'm not sure if I'm really helping people much here, because I know it's hard to get your mind around. But once I had worked this all out, it became really evident that there was 2 or really 3 different counts that are being used in the book of Ezekiel. He counts Zedekiah's reign, which is spring to spring. He counts the years of the captivity, which he only mentions 3 times. And he counts those fall to fall. And then he just does a regular ordinal count from the year that the temple is destroyed. So it's the 14th year. And also as the Jubilee count. So maybe that's 4 different ways of counting. The Jubilee, of course, is a fall to fall count, but it's a separate type of count. And people just never reconcile these. That is, they don't know how to reconcile them. They just recognize that there appears to be contradictions in the book of Ezekiel, and they leave it at that. But it's meant to be understood, and so this is how we understand it. Now, this 13 years is the 14th year. Is there any relationship to this and the sabbatical cycle then? That is there a sabbatical Jubilee cycle that's connected to these 14 years from when the temple is destroyed or the city's destroyed to this Jubilee cycle that is being used by Ezekiel? You understand what I'm asking? Because where does Ezekiel get this Jubilee cycle from? Why is it being used here? Because we can't line it up with the Jubilee sabbatical cycle connected with the Exodus, with the entering in of the land of Canaan. Okay, maybe I'll do some things that can kind of help us here a little bit. So I'm going to go to these slides that I talked about. I remember the number. So these are some things I put together where I have the Jubilee cycle going fall to fall and the sabbatical cycle going spring to spring, but I don't know if that's correct. But let's just take a look at it here. When Daniel is taken captive, is that a sabbatical year? Or is there a sabbatical year in connection with Daniel's captivity?
Well, it's connected to the 490 years.
Okay.
Rest.
Okay, so that means we're going to go to here. I'm going to use the calculator. We'll do it this way. It's not the easiest way to do it. I know somewhere I have a spreadsheet of all this kind of stuff. Okay, so let's take. So the 490 years begins where? For Daniel's captivity.
1097.
Okay, so you're going to go to 1097, and we can then just subtract 490, and that will bring us to 607. Now this is going to be in the fall of 607. So if we go into the fall of 607, we could say that there must be a sabbatical cycle there connecting. Maybe it's the beginning of a sabbatical cycle, or it's the of sabbatical year, right? Or it's the end of a sabbatical year, or something to that effect. Now, the fact that we can connect this back to 1097, what would be the significance of that in connection with the sabbatical cycle? Why is this 7 times? Because this is going to be the second 7 times. Wild beasts shall rob you of your children. Why are we connecting this with a sabbatical cycle? Leviticus 26. Why are we doing that? Is it that everybody already understands this stuff really well, or we don't understand it well?
I'm speaking for myself. It's the latter,
Okay.
I think.
Okay, so Leviticus 25 is going to talk about this Jubilee sabbatical cycle, right? And then you're going to have Leviticus 26. And you're going to have the blessings for obedience. And then you're going to have the curses, the punishment for disobedience. And the first 7 times is going to be Manasseh's captivity. And it's going to happen 70 years before Daniel's captivity, correct? So 677 is going to be Manasseh's captivity. And during that time from when Manasseh is taken captive, he's going to be taken captive. The land is going to be forsaken of both her kings, Hoshea back in 723 and Manasseh in 677. And then that child that's born, butter and honey shall he eat till he know to choose the good and refuse the evil. So he's going to receive a conversion experience. And then his grandson, Josiah, is going to enact a reform, which if he could have enacted, would have averted the other 7 times. That is, if Josiah had managed to observe the sabbatical rest of the land and all these different things have happened, he could have averted what would have happened to Daniel, to Jehoiachin, and to Zedekiah, and to Jerusalem, and all those things. But he didn't. Josiah fails in those reforms, which is, of course, prophesied that he would. So I don't like ifs, but you're going to have these 7 times. So the first 7 times is, I will break the pride of your power. So this is going to be Manasseh, right? And then the second 7 times, wild beasts shall rob you of your children. That's Daniel's captivity. And there's 70 years between there. So is that 10 sabbatical cycles?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in trying to connect this, so if we go to 1097 and you add 490 years, so I'm just going to go over here. So here's one of the problems I guess we have. So we're going to say that 1097 is marking one of those cycles, and I just added 490 years. So obviously that's going to go past 1533, and so I'm going to subtract 49. So that's another Jubilee cycle. And then I'm going to subtract 49 again, and 1489. Now, we can't really connect this then with, if I add 7 years, that's going to be 1496. It's going to be 3 years later, they're going to cross the Jordan. So we can see whatever this sabbatical cycle that happens with the rest of the land, with them conquering the land, it's not going to be connected with the sabbatical cycle and Jubilee cycle, connected with the judgment of the 7 times of Leviticus 26. Can we see that it doesn't line up?
Yeah.
Okay. So now people try to, and I've seen all kinds of people try to connect these different Jubilee sabbatical cycles together. But to me, the one that's happening with Leviticus 26 as a judgment, we definitely have, even the 70 weeks, these are all Jubilee sabbatical cycles, but we can't really make a connection with these other Jubilee sabbatical cycles. That is, there isn't one Jubilee sabbatical cycle. There's the one that they're given when they begin to plant in the promised land after they conquer it. And then you're going to have a new sabbatical Jubilee cycle in connection with Saul becoming king. It's not going to line up with the other Jubilee sabbatical cycles. And And then you're going to have this other Jubilee cycle from 457 BC. And again, it's not going to line up with these other Jubilee sabbatical cycles. So the 490 years of the 70 weeks of Daniel 9 doesn't line up with the Jubilee cycle that we have here in the book of Ezekiel, or the one that we have in the story of the Exodus. Right, so them conquering the land in the book of Joshua. So why is that? Why do we not have these Jubilee sabbatical cycles line up in some kind of nice pattern? Now, some people try to do that. That is, they ignore reality, they ignore all the other evidences in the Bible, and they just make them line up because they think they must. But why do they not? Okay, can anybody give me a reason why they don't line up? You can see, even if I go to 723 and I take some of these other ones, they don't line up with the other ones. So why is that? Nobody has an answer?
Is it because they're not understanding the way that these years would work, the calendars?
No, that's not why. At least I don't think that's the reason why. You're saying that the Jews didn't really understand how the calendars work, or the prophets didn't understand that? Because Daniel's going to give a period of 70 weeks, and it doesn't line up with Ezekiel's Jubilee cycle.
Than them.
Yeah, and what's that?
I said I was speaking more we,
Okay.
as in the current period, we do not understand this as well as we should. I'm not speaking of the prophets or the Jews at that time. I believe that they had a good understanding, but we still don't fully have the concept locked in.
Okay, well, I think we do. If you're going to talk about us personally, I think we have the chronology of the Bible with tons of evidence that we do understand these cycles.
But do those around us, those that are not currently studying this in the movement, have a good understanding of this?
No. And so they try to make them line up, but they don't line up, and that's because they're not supposed to line up.
That's the point.
Yeah, because I don't think we should expect that the Jubilee cycle that was rejected by the Jews when they received a king should line up with the Jubilee cycle of punishment, if we want to look at it that way. Right? So there's a Jubilee cycle that was given, but we shouldn't expect that that Jubilee cycle is still in effect. Because when they failed, and that was given to the Jews in the Promised Land, it was based upon the cycles of the Promised Land. There's no reason to expect that that cycle still exists, or that we should follow that cycle in some way. It was given to the land of Israel. And then when they get a king in 1097, well, that's going to be a type of rebellion. And that creates a cycle that then is going to be used when it comes to the 70 years when Daniel is taken captive, because there's going to be 490 years. And on either side of the end of that 490 years, there's the 70 years of probation that's given from Manasseh's captivity to Daniel's captivity, and then 70 years that follows afterwards. And that's what we call the Babylonian captivity. And that's going to end in 537, 536. So going back to these charts here, we can see we have these a sabbatical year. So whatever year, whether it's 607 or 606, there's going to be a sabbatical year. Now, the way that I line this up is I believe that at the time, 586 is a sabbatical year. And if that's the case, then 537 is a sabbatical year and 536 is a Jubilee year. So this is kind of staggered in a funny way, but got here ecclesiastical years, civil years. So 457 would line up with 34 and 35. So you're going to have a close of probation here with the stoning of Stephen. And I was lining up all these different sabbatical years for someone to try to figure it out, how that worked. But anyway, the point is, there is 49 years from what happens with the destruction of the city and the temple in 586 to the decree of Cyrus and them returning to the land. And so can we see that 49 years is a Jubilee cycle? So the 70 years is divided into a period of 21 years. I'll do this on the whiteboard. I know it's, let me see here. Okay, let's get this set up. Oops. And so you can see that? Everybody can see the whiteboard?
You're sharing your.
Okay, I'm still sharing. All right, that's what I forgot to do. Okay. There
And
we
here
go.
I just thought I was blind.
Yes. Okay. So if we understand this 70 years, you're going to have 21 years and 49 years.
Are you sharing the right camera?
What?
You're very distant. I don't think that's the right camera you're sharing.
No?
You have to look at the other camera. There's two different cameras. Here, I'll do this. How's that? Now that I turned off that one camera. You just have to look at a different screen.
I don't think it works because the audio is coming from the one that you just turned off.
Okay, so, oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I'll do it this way then. How's that? Nope, that's not going to work. I have to do this. How's that?
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, even a blind man can see that.
Okay.
Thanks for the commentary.
Okay. It's a little bit dark humor.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So now we can see this. So this is the Babylonian captivity. So we can see this is a Jubilee cycle. So this is going to be 607, 586, and 537. That is, I'm counting from the fall to the fall of 537. And that's going to be when Cyrus comes to the throne. And then what's going to happen is he's going to issue a decree halfway between here, right? So there's going to be 6 months, and then 536. So this is actually technically 536 starts here. Okay, right? But in the fall of 536, they're going to have returned to the land, and they're going to set up an altar on the first day of the 7th month. And is this going to be marking then, somewhere in here, there's a Jubilee? Would we agree with that? Since this is, whether this is a sabbatical year, and this is a sabbatical year, this would then mark a Jubilee year, right?
All right.
This would be a sabbatical year from the fall of 537 to the fall of 536. And so 536 would then be a Jubilee year if this is a Jubilee cycle.
Okay.
Make sense?
Continue, please.
Yeah. So what should have happened then is, 585 would have been a Jubilee year, but they didn't keep the Jubilee. Now, in the book of Jeremiah, it talks about Zedekiah wanting to reinstate the sabbatical Jubilee cycle. We've studied this before. And what happened? So he was going to repent. He was then going to avoid God's judgments because of the prophesying of Jeremiah. He was then going to reinstate this sabbatical Jubilee cycle. But what happened when he wanted to do that?
They're going to let go captives, slaves, and so forth. But then they just arrested them or took them again and made them slaves.
Right, and that's because of the protest of the princes, basically, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Right. So the people who had money and who were oppressing others didn't want that to happen. So he fails in that reform, and then Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And so that's going to happen like somewhere connected with what's going to happen with the siege. So it's before the siege occurs that he plans to do this, but he backtracks, and then the siege of Jerusalem is going to happen in 587, and then finally Jerusalem destroyed in 586. So instead of being able to have a sabbatical in Jubilee year, they're going to end up having the city destroyed. But 49 years later, they're going to have, at least a typical sense, a Jubilee and a sabbatical year. Sabbatical and Jubilee year. Does that make sense to people? So then
Yes.
we're going to put 537 here and 457. Now the number of years between here is 80 years. So this is not a sabbatical Jubilee cycle here between here. So when we deal with this 490 years, we can see that it doesn't line up with this 49 years. Or more specifically, this 49 years does not line up with this 49 years. There's 10 years here extra. Like if this had been 70 years, these two would have lined up, at least as sabbatical cycles.
Got it.
Okay, but so they don't. So this Jubilee cycle, and the original Jubilee cycle from when they conquer the land and begin to plant and start a sabbatical cycle, Jubilee cycle, they don't line up together at all. We can't match them up. They're all off. But we have these different periods. We have 14 years. We have another 14 years. We have different periods of 7 years. And people try to get them to align, but they don't align. And it's not because we have the wrong chronology. So some people think that we need to correct the chronology to get them to align. But my argument is that they don't align, but there's a reason why they don't align. And what would be the reason they don't align? Why does God not have these things all align? I mean, you would think on the surface, well, wouldn't he just have his judgments happen in the Jubilee sabbatical cycle that was given to ancient Israel? But can we think of a reason why they don't align? Not just because they don't, but a reason why God would not have them align.
It's almost as if because the nation had gone into captivity separately, that the Jubilee cycle was being torn apart.
Okay. Yes. So they have broken this covenant, and God's no longer honoring that aspect of it. And he's now going to use their actions of getting a king to set up a cycle. And then Ezekiel's cycle, his is going to be based upon the reform of Josiah, right? So
Okay.
Ezekiel creates this cycle because he's looking back at the reform of Josiah, and he's going to create a cycle. So even Ezekiel's cycle, we got basically Ezekiel has a cycle, which is different from the cycle that we have for the 49 years from 586 to 537. Ezekiel's cycle doesn't line up with that. And neither does Daniel's 49-year cycle that starts the 70 weeks. None of these cycles align with each other. But also, when you look at the 7 times, I mean, you have 2 of them that line up. That is Manasseh's and Daniel's. They create a period of 140 years. But then you have another period of 70 years for the temple, and another period of 70 years that would be for based on Jehoiachin's captivity. It's really a period of 140 years because it doesn't divide into 2 periods of 70. But each of these are illustrating something different. Some are for the land, some are for the kingship, and some are for the people.
But all 3 are elements of the covenant.
Right, all 3 of elements of the covenant, right. So the sabbatical rest of the land and the Jubilee cycle that accompanies it is an illustration of one aspect of the covenant. So when they get a king, it starts a new cycle. Does that make sense to people?
I've never really considered that concept.
Okay.
But you're right, because they are rejecting their ultimate king and replacing God with an imperfect, finite ruler.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so God is using these cycles. It comes from this pattern of the week, but he's not applying it just because he created this cycle with ancient Israel, he's not going to then apply this in the way that we often expect. And that's because he's illustrating different aspects of the covenant. Now, I'm going to go here to one of my other charts and just show you why this is. So I hope this is making much more sense for people. This whole idea. So this is an old chart made back in 2013. Let's get it centered. I can't get it centered. Get a bit smaller, but I want it bigger. But that's just too bad. Okay. So here we have these periods of 490 years. We have Saul as anointed king, 1097, and there's going to be 490 years for the kingship. And then we're going to see there's 490 years for the temple. Now, this is based upon the sabbatical cycle, at least, in that from 1097 to 106 is 91 years, which is 13 times 7, correct?
Well, 13 times 7, wouldn't that be 91?
Yeah. So from 1097 to 106 is 91 years. And so then you're going to have 400 years for the temple. Now, we know that with the kingship, there's a 490 years preceded by 70 years from Manasseh's captivities to Daniel, and then followed by 70 years of the Babylonian captivity. And we can see that 70 years is divided into 21 and 49. So the Babylonian captivity, as I drew there, there's from Daniel's captivity to the destruction of Jerusalem is 3 sabbatical cycles. And so I argue that those are sabbatical cycles based upon this kingship cycle. But the temple has its own sabbatical cycle. That is, there's going to be 70 years for the temple. That's going to start 21 years after Daniel's captivity. And then after the 70 years for the temple, with Darius's decree in 516, and then finally it completed in the end of that year. So it's in 515 on our calendar. But on the 3rd day of the 12th month, they're going to have the dedication of that temple and then the Passover following 40 days later. But there's going to be 59 years between the completion of the temple to Artaxerxes' decree. So it's not 49 years. So that means that 7 times 7 years from Artaxerxes' decree to 408, so 457 to 408, that 49 years, which is a Jubilee cycle, is not lined up with this Jubilee cycle. And then you can't line up Ezekiel's Jubilee cycle with any of these, right? So you have this problem from people's perspective that somehow we should make these align, but they don't. And that's because there's different aspects of the covenant being illustrated, but also there's just different events that initiate these cycles. So God is going to use this cycle of 7s and the Jubilee cycle as an illustration or a type. And this goes, of course, back to the sabbatical cycle of the week, because we know that there is creation. Now, where do we place creation in this movement? What date?
(40:46).
Okay, so 4046, right? So if you take 4046 and you start to try to count Jubilee cycles, and I'm not going to do it here, you're not going to find that it lines up with these other Jubilee cycles. That is, we can't go back to creation and say, well, there's a Jubilee cycle from creation and we're going to use that. Now, I make an argument that Adam and Eve fall 8 years after creation. Can't prove it, but it does connect to 1097. That is, it puts 1097 exactly halfway between 1844 and 8 years after creation. So I put Saul being anointed king in 1097 as the center of a chiasm. That is, when they reject God as their king, there's going to be a period of time that is 120 times, I can't remember how it goes. So, well, 60 times 49 years. That's the way to look at it. So 2,940 years. Is that right? Yeah. And then another 2,940 years to 1844 from 1097. So if you add 1097 plus 1843, you get what am I doing? 1097. I know you can't see this. Yeah, you get 2,940 years. Probably have a chart of this somewhere. See if I can find it. Oh yeah, so here I use 4037 as the origin of sin, and it's 129 times 49 years to the Jubilee beginning in 1844, which Ellen White marks as a Jubilee. And I don't know if this makes sense to everybody. I've got all these, but there's the 2,940 years, which is this one here that goes to 1097, and another 2,940 years to 1844, which I've divided into 490 and 2450. So that's just taking from Saul being anointed king to Daniel's captivity is 490, and then another 49 times 49 plus 49 years to 1844. So that's 7 times 35. I don't know. I don't want to go through this whole chart and explain it all. But the significance here is that we can look at a Jubilee cycle that ends in 1844. And so we could connect the Great Jubilee of Miller and the 490 years here all together. But you're going to see that the 2,300 years is going to end in 1844. It's not going to make Daniel's 490 years fit into this Jubilee cycle in a nice, neat way. I didn't put it in here. But from 607 to 457 isn't going to be divisible by 7. Anyway, any questions on this? I spent a lot more time than I expected. But why have we done this? Why have we taken this excursion into the Jubilee sabbatical cycles in our connection of trying to understand the lines of Josiah? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to understand?
The lines of Josiah are going to help us.
I meant Joshua is what I meant, not Josiah. Joshua. Okay, yeah, go on.
Okay, then the point I was going to make is moot, so don't just forget it.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so Josiah. So we're dealing with these 14 years from Josiah. Not Josiah, Joshua. Pardon me. And this Caleb. So we're going to put Caleb here as this point here. Caleb being 85 years old. So, but why are we doing this? Why are we looking at the Jubilee sabbatical cycle? How does this help us?
Well, in one way, it helps us to start to have a little clearer understanding of what was going on, but it should also help us place some of these items on the line that we've been discussing for the last week.
Right. And that's because they become symbols. Now, and I have here this 7 years and 7 years. And we can see this is a chiasm. And we have the center, which is the cross, right? This is Christ's cross. And we have this bigger chiasm. We have this chiasm that Stephen and I found or discovered, or whatever it was, back in, it's over here, from 731 BC to when Jacob blesses his 12 sons. It's 7 times 2, and this is a typo here, they get it correct. 7 times 2, 52 years, which is 1764 years to 34 AD, and then another 1764 years to 1798. Now, why isn't the cross the center of this one? Like, why is 34 AD the center? It's the same problem we have with these Jubilee sabbatical cycles. It would have really been nice if we could have put the cross here in the center, but we don't. We have this as the end of 7 years. Okay, so relates to closes of probation. Yes. Okay. So again, we can see that there's all of these different structural chiasms. And there's a symbol that occurs here. Christ is going to be standing on the right hand of God when Stephen is being stoned in 34 AD. And it becomes the center of a chiasm. But Christ also has a week that is a center of a chiasm. And we have other structures that have centers of chiasms that are going to symbolically represent that. That is, Christ's week is the primary chiasm, right? It's the one that all the others are the basis. It's the basis of all the other ones. But yet, I don't know that I can place 31 AD in the center of some other chiasm. That is, I've never been able to do that. In all of these different structural chiasms, Christ's cross isn't the center of any one of them in a literal sense. I've never been able to go to 31 AD and find spans of time that show that the cross is the center. So it's not the physical center of any other chiasms, but it's the symbolic center of those chiasms. That is, when we look at the other chiasms, we see the cross there. And
You
so
also have,
what's that, Steve?
in 1731 BC, you have Jacob being 147 years old,
Yeah,
and he's blessing his 12 sons.
yeah.
And 12 times 147 is 1764 years as well. So
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. So that 1764 years, as Stephen said, you can have Jacob blessing his 12 sons when he's 147, and 12 times 147 is 1764. So, but we can see that God has a pattern, and it doesn't always fit what we imagine things should be. That is, he's illustrating different things by these different structural chiasms. And so there isn't one big chiasm that encompasses everything with the cross at the center. The cross at the center illustrates all of these other structural chiasms. Okay, so we went a bit over time. Any other final comments? Thanks for that, Stephen.
Your number there after 34 AD,
Yeah,
is that wrong?
which number?
252.
Yes, that's
Should
right.
be doubled.
Yeah, that's wrong. These are just working charts that I was doing, and I copy things and then I don't correct them. Yeah, so 504 years, correct. So we can see this is 2 times 252, 5 times 252, which is 7 times 252. And then this one's divided into 2 periods of 756. So you can see 723 BC here is a center of these 6 252s. And then this 252 here being from Jacob blessing his sons to the end of the 14 years or the end of the 54 years, however you look at it. So it's connected with the rest of the land. And you can see why 723 then is here as the center of this little chiasm. So there's all these different structures, and they're all related. They're all thematic. They're all illustrating something. This is the history of ancient Israel, from Jacob blessing his sons to them being rejected as God's chosen people. And then you still have this period of the Protestant era, of the times of the Gentiles, being persecuted by pagan Rome and then papal Rome, ending in 1798. So this is illustrating something. These chiasms illustrate something. They're significantly meaningful in how they're structured. So,
Theodore,
yeah.
ain't that 723 to 1798 2520?
Yes, this is a 2520 from here to here. Yeah. So you can see this is a 1260, and then this is 504 plus 756 is also 1260.
Okay.
This is 3 times 252 and 2 times 252, which is 5 times 252. And 1260 is 5 times 252. Yeah, so they're all related. They're interlocked with each other, like gears in a clock.
What about if you went backwards to 720, 23 back 25, 20 years? Where would it end up?
Not anywhere that I could figure out.
I'm just curious. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not. I'm curious about all those things too. So Stephen and I have worked out a lot of things. We've looked at all the different dates and the structures, but I mean, all you would get there is 3,200 and 243 BC, which doesn't line up with anything that I know of.
I was just looking at from 1731 to 723
Yeah,
is 1008,
yeah.
and we had that. Was that one of the numbers we had connected with Acts, or was it?
Oh, that was 1,080.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just find it interesting. If you add 723, if you add 144 or 1,440, it takes you to 718, 80.
So you're going to take 723 plus, and
1,004.
from 723 to 1440. You're going to add 1,440 years to
Yes.
723. So I'd subtract, right? 723 minus 1440. And that's going to bring you to 17.
No, just 718.
Oh, 718. Oh, so just as a symbol, it becomes 718 AD, whether it's actually AD or not, whether something happens in 718 AD or not. It just brings you to that symbol. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's many things. That's the thing that's amazing about all of these numbers, these structures, is we're not doing numerology. It is, we're not using the magical use of numbers that, are going to do something special. It's just that God uses these numbers and these structures. It's the structures that's really important. And the numbers become symbols within these structures that illustrate things. That is, the symbols tell you some information about that structure. And we find all these different types of numerical connections between these numbers that we had been using and didn't understand that they have relationships with each other. So, just an example of that, I know I'm going over time, but, Iran had noticed some things regarding, I'll just copy these and then put these in. It's going to have the times attached to them, but in the chat, so you can look at them. So these are these different dates. They won't be able to see them on the video, but I'm just reading it from the chat. So if we take, that's got a phone number in there, but I don't know why it puts his phone number every single time. I didn't copy the phone number. That looks like a phone number. Is that a phone number? Yeah. Anyway, nobody else can see that on the video, but so the 5th day of the 4th month is the number 54. 54 times 54 is this number 2916, which is 1629 is this number if we just invert it, that Odilio found. But more interestingly, 9 hours and 20 minutes. So the 20th day of the 9th month gives us the symbol of 920. It's equal to 7/18 of a day. So 7/18 is, of course, July 18. And so 9 hours and 20 minutes is 7/18 of a day. And we can use this 7/18. So we can, 7/18 of 1260 years is 490 years. 7/18 times 20 is 7.7 repetend. 7/18 of 390, which is from Ezekiel, is 151.666 repetend. So we have the symbol of 151 and the 666. And then this one I find the most interesting. If we take 9/11 as a fraction and we multiply it by 187, we get the symbol of 153, the number of prophesying, again, from the 153 fishes. That relates, of course, to the 1533 years, or 1533 days from August 11th, 1840 to October 22nd, 1844. So there's all these different symbols, but we're not using them as magic. We're just recognizing that these structures exist, these patterns exist with these numbers that should be unrelated, but aren't. So I think it's an important point that we need to keep in mind. So anyway, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, again, we are so thankful for all the things that you teach us and for the time that you've given us to study. Help us to continue to study and understand these things. Be with each person. May your angels watch over them. And may you guide us through the rest of this week. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.